Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment to remind everybody that because in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining the information of underage users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, aka COPPA, they implemented a new policy which scapegoats creators, meaning that I have to make sure that at the start everyone understands that this video is not meant for children. It's not targeted at kids, it is not marketed towards kids. This Who is a family show that kids can watch, but this video, as with all the videos on my channel, come at it through an adult perspective. Viewer discretion is advised. That being said, it's the 18th of May, 2020. I just finished listening, and today we're starting a look at Mawdryn Undead, the first story in the Black Guardian trilogy, a trilogy of connected season 20 stories from television, all featuring the Black Guardian, starting today with part 1. Mawdryn Undead, it actually starts out really well. It's a really solid opener. It's not perfect by any means. There are issues with the plot, especially with a lot of the way that this story is done. Particularly the music. The music score for this is really jaunty and like really happy sounding. Like this, it doesn't sound like the like a story like this should. Story like this should be maybe a bit more somber, a bit more reserved, because it's dealing with interesting subject matter, mainly that were set at this school where Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge-Stewart, who we haven't seen since way back in Terror of the Zygons, which, watching this in order, makes you realize how much you miss the character. Because he's one of those characters that you can't help but love. But he is also one of those characters where you get to see just what the character can do, what a lot of the amazing stuff is. There really is a lot of cool, fun stuff here, because we are dealing with this. There's this character called Turlough, played by Mark Strickson, who basically with his friend Ibbotson, aka Hippo, which is just Ibbotson's kind of this stereotypical nerd, and he's honestly the most annoying aspect of this first episode. Like, just every time he's on screen, you're like, really, are we doing this? This is dumb. This is just weird. But it's it's not like it's not a good way of introducing them, because you have the whole he's kind of just it's kind of just a dumb stereotype that was already played out by 1983. But like, they steal a car, they get this classic car, the Brigadiers, they crash it, and in crashing it, Turlough, basically his mind goes into the power of the Black Guardian, who's basically like, yeah, I'll let you get off the planet because, he knows he's an alien. Turlough's an alien, because that's a plot point. It's Peter Greenaway's script is just a lot of weird plot points and weird ideas, fun ideas, but still weird ideas, just kind of thrown out there, one after the other. It's just an odd thing that the story does. That it's like, okay, like that's where we're going with this. It's something that I don't. It's a very, very different story because of that. Like it's weird. Like for this first episode, the Doctor and his Tegan don't do much. They get crashed. They crash into a star, into like a spaceship that is kind of sort of in flight, but it's also like it's been abandoned. It's weird, and they get transported to Earth. And Turlough Turlough meets the Doctor, and because Turlough wanders into the TARDIS, because the Doctor leaves the door open. There's just it's a really enjoyable episode, but when you start to think about it, it actually, like, a lot of the setup is kind of just a bit lazy, especially with having the Doctor not lock the TARDIS. Like, really, you should know by now, Doctor, that locking the TARDIS is a smart decision. Like, you're this is how you end up with stowaways. So you really get to see that, the Doctor didn't lock the TARDIS properly. So Turlough gets in. Him and the Doctor back to Earth, while Nyssa and Tegan take the TARDIS, because that's what they're doing. And there's a lot. There's just it goes to be a lot of running back and forth, basically, so that we can get the Doctor out on this hill where, near an obelisk, where the transmat capsule is, until it can take a rock and attempt to smash him over the head, as the cliffhanger, which is a good cliffhanger. It's a great cliffhanger. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. It is a good how does he get out of that? That's very, very weird, and very, very different. But it's also just one of those cliffhangers that is okay. It's there. It's it's not necessarily it's not everything. Like, a lot of this episode is just setting up the characters. It doesn't actually, and the whole idea that Turlough's gonna try to kill the Doctor. That's it. It's not. It's not a different thing. It's a very, very weird thing. Just ending the story. So overall, I'd have to give part 1 of Mawdryn Undead an 8 out of 10. Alright, it's the 20th of May 2020, and I just finished watching part 2 of Mawdryn Undead, which is actually a really, really solid continuing episode. It's where things actually start to move, and we actually get to see, get to understand what Mawdryn is, and what the title Mawdryn Undead refers to. It's mainly referring to this character played by David Collings, who, I don't know if David Collings has actually appeared in a Doctor Who story before this. In our marathon, I covered his appearance in Jago and Lightfoot, as Gabriel Saunders in series 2, but he is this alien character who owns this spaceship, and he basically, I guess, is, well, undead. He's there's this big monologue near the end of the episode where he goes right to the camera and it basically is like, I'm going to take, basically become a Time Lord myself, some sort of creature. Like, and I will say, the makeup team here, makeup was done by Carolyn Perry and Sheila Wells. I think that's how you pronounce that. They did a really, really good job. One, of just the corpse form of Mawdryn. Like he looks so horribly, just bruised and beaten up, and it is a really, really good, and really, creepy makeup design. Like, oh, I just realized he was in Revenge of the Cybermen and Robots of Death, so we have covered stuff with him in the main series. And he was also in King of Sontar. Okay, cool. Yeah, so he's done a lot of stuff. But yeah, he sells the role. Like, it is very much something that he has done. This is, his absolute, absolute, this absolute matter of being a, of taking over a performance and then tricking and being devious and tricking Tegan and Nissa to both believe that he's the Doctor. Also, but while all of that is, going on, that is, the plot, you actually have the Doctor meeting with the Brigadier, and Tegan also meeting with the Brigadier, but in a different period of time. Like, this story actually takes place across 2 different time zones, and that's actually really important for how the story plays out. Mainly because the Brigadier, for some reason in 1983, doesn't remember the Doctor, and apparently had suffered from some sort of a nervous breakdown, which is, definitely an interesting sort of story. It's definitely one of those, it's an interesting idea and something different and something new. But it's a fun idea. So you have the 5th Doctor trying to get the Brigadier to remember him, realizing that, it's not, this isn't an incarnation that he would know, but it's still not like he shouldn't not know him. This is the Doctor after all, which I think is fascinating. It's a really good, a really good sort of idea for the story to take this route. It's different, and it's there's the different just idea of who of who the character is. Like, it's a different sort of story, and because of that, it does, a lot of differing things. A lot of different bits of what the story can do. It's this weird little bits of the story where things are different, and I really do enjoy it. There are some flaws, mainly Turlough's just kind of ineffectual as a character. Like, he's going to kill the Doctor, except he meets the Doctor and is immediately, I'm not gonna kill the Doctor, which is, that's not necessarily a good way of keeping a character's motivation strong or interesting. It's all kind of sad, kind of really sad. It's not like perhaps it's something like that should have been done at least in this way. It should have been done more of the Doctor being less of a less of a different sort of thing that the that the character can do. It's just different. So overall, I'd have to give part 2 of Mawdryn Undead an 8 out of 10 because it's a great episode. It just isn't, perfect. Alright, it's the 21st of May 2020. I just finished watching part 3 of Mawdryn Undead. This third episode gets really, really interesting because it's the episode where Peter Grimwade kind of just, he doesn't exactly stop, but he kind of stalls for a little bit. And by stalls for a little bit, I mean there is a long pause between the previous episode. There's between actually moving the story along at a good, decent pace. Because, well, this is an episode where you have a lot of explanation as to what Mawdryn wants as a character. Mawdryn is this weird character who wants to basically see himself become a Time Lord, but he wanted him and his I guess, and his crewmates, they aren't really explained as to who they are. Wants to see, basically wants to see himself become the villain. It's like wants him to become immortal like a Time Lord. They got this immortality, like they have immortality, like that is there, and it being there, there's this really, really solid sort of thing. There is something different with that now they just want to die, but in this laboratory, which its design looks kind of like a TARDIS console room, which I think has to be intentional. There's a central console with this spherical thing that sort of takes the place of the time rotor, but it's definitely one of those things where you have where we have the plot and the stories and everything very, very very, very different. It's a different sort of thing, where the plot is almost put on hold just the it's something different. You know, you know, it's 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 this uh it's this very very different plot, and I I like it. It's good, but this episode is just padded. Like, there's this whole stuff of like, you have the two brigadiers, which is just kind of a problem for the plot because, well, having two versions of the brigadier in the story, and taking their the entire story together. One of them just sort of wanders around the ship, while the one from the present day one doesn't. Like, that's just kind of dull. It's like it's setting something up. Like, they name drop the Lethbridge limitation effect. They explain what it is. It's been altered since it appeared in Day of the Daleks, but that's okay. That's the thing. This is Skill Doctor, but this episode does nothing with having two versions of the Brigadier, like, and Deegan and Nissa do run around. It's getting things in place, and it's enjoyable. Like, it is really enjoyable. There is the entire story, like, all about the characters, doing something weird, and something different, but it's interesting enough. And I mean, the makeup work on Mawdryn here is great, and David Collins is great as the villain. There is a real, there really is a good villain here, but and you have the makeup job on him that just steals the show. There's this pulsating brain here that is just creepy, and he plays the character so desperate. There's a lot to like. It's a good solid episode. It's just kind of let down a little bit by a lot of unnecessary padding. So overall, I'd have to give part 3 of Mawdryn Undead a 7 out of 10. It is the 24th of May, 2020, and I just finished watching part 4 of Mawdryn Undead, the concluding episode, and probably the best episode of the story, because it actually, well, it does stuff. And by it does stuff, I mean it creates a story where we're basically, as viewers, allowed to completely understand what the characters are, and into a conclusion where the ending makes sense. Like, the ending itself makes sense, for where the characters are, and what the characters are doing, like, and why, like, why is the Doctor, how did they get out of this one? Like, what coaxes the Doctor to actually help Mawdryn? Well, the possible death of his two companions, because, the whole mutation with Mawdryn, Mawdryn, I mean, if there's one complaint, is Mawdryn is too much of a villain. Like, Peter Grimwade kind of wrote the Doctor here as a little off-kilter, like, not actually caring about Mawdryn's plight when really he should have, because Mawdryn just wants to die. Like, this isn't like a character who is trying to live and take over the universe. This is a character, and 8 characters who just want to end their lives after an existence that they find pitiful and impossible, really, to keep living. Something that I think is an interesting sort of... It's an interesting way of telling the story, that it's like, okay, here we go, they're living this existence that they don't want to live, so, not having the doctor want to help is just something that comes across as weird. Also, but the entire thing comes from the two brigadiers meeting. That's why the younger brigadier was wandering around the ship through the entire time. Seriously, it's like they short out the time energy, then makes the younger brigadier have a nervous breakdown, so he can become the older brigadier. And when that happens, that energy is used to kill the mutants instead of the doctor's regeneration energy, and the doctor's only brought back because essentially the mutation gets into Tegan and Nyssa, and that stops that essentially stops their own changing and different in their basically their experience as being put through this very, very different story. It's all essentially building up to a different sort of conclusion that doesn't entirely work, but it doesn't also not work. It works well, really well. It's a good conclusion. Kind of ends in a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but that's okay. Also, the Black Guardian doesn't actually do anything. Turlough finds his way onto the TARDIS as a companion now, which is again weird because he doesn't actually do much, and he doesn't actually get that well developed of a character. He's an alien, he wants to get back to his home, but he never actually tells the doctor where he's from, or because the doctor could probably help, and that is genuinely a possibility. The doctor could help you. This isn't the complete end of all your chances of getting home and surviving and seeing, I guess, your family again. It really isn't. It's more of you can still find a way back there, which is kind of a solid sort of thing where the next story can do. This is the first story in obviously a trilogy of stories, but that still doesn't mean that that doesn't mean it's the ending that you particularly want the story to have, because it does just kind of be like, oh well, Turlough's now a part of the TARDIS team, so you have 3 companions again, and it's weird. But again, David Collins is great as Mawdryn. There's that real desperation here, and everything sort of goes around. And Nick Courtney is always fun to watch, even if the Brigadier didn't necessarily need to be here. But overall, Mawdryn Undead Part 4 is a great episode. It moves along at a pace. It's really it's enjoyable. The entire story is enjoyable. There are problems, but a lot of the problems you don't entirely notice until after you watch it. You're like, wait, and you start to think about it, and then you're like, oh, this is wrong. But it's at least enjoyable enough to watch and experience well. Basically while you're watching, everything is fine and perfectly interesting. But once you finish, you really aren't. So overall, I probably have to give Part 4 of Mawdryn Undead a 9 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give Mawdryn Undead a final score of 8 out of 10. And with that, we are actually at the end of the story. Let's get a conversation started down below. Do you agree with me on thoughts on Mawdryn Undead? What's your opinions? Do you disagree with me? As always, please, thank you everyone for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we actually, we actually get to see a companion departure in Doctor Who with Doctor Who Terminus.